G'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to talk about probably the most important piece of postural information that you will ever hear. And it sounds like a big statement because it is, but it's born from conversations that I have every day with patients surrounding sort of the deeper root cause of their dysfunction. And I guess if we sort of divide people into two sort of categories, where there's the obvious spinal dysfunction category where you might have some overt neck pain, maybe some upper back issues, some lower back issues. You have genuine, overt, obvious back pain. And then in the second group of people, we have people that have some back-related peripheral dysfunction. And if you're a follower of the channel and you've sort of been through the Your Wellness Nerd back catalogue before, you probably sort of well know by now that there's a whole range of peripheral issues that do have a sneaky back-related component. And that can be things ranging from RSI of the hands and fingers, tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, a whole bunch of shoulder dysfunction, moving down, we're talking patellar tendonitis, groin issues, gluteal issues, hip bursitis. There's a whole range of peripheral things, headaches as well, that potentially have a really strong and relatively hidden spinal component to that dysfunction that often gets missed. And if you fall into either one of those categories or both, inevitably we're often having a conversation about your posture, about the positions you're putting your spine into on a regular basis throughout the day. And I think one of the reasons why this is potentially such an important topic of conversation is if we create another two subgroups here, there's often a group of people who, when you say, look, we're thinking that something to do with your postural habits or the positions you put your spine in is leading you down a path for some type of dysfunction, a lot of people can default to two states of mind. The first one is that there are a lot of people who are like, you know what, now as soon as you say that, I get it. I can picture myself in a really crappy position on the couch or watching TV or maybe on the computer or driving, whatever it is. And it doesn't take too much convincing for them to understand that posture is potentially a really important part of solving their dysfunction. But for a whole range of other people, and a lot of people, as soon as you say the words bad posture or posture isn't good enough, and for good reason, there's a group of people that think that's just not the case for them because they feel like they've got good posture or they've got good postural habits. And I think the reason why this video is potentially very important for anyone's postural conversation is we want to show you where those holes are. And even if you are someone who is completely on board and motivated to change your posture because you know it sucks or you know that you could do better and you haven't necessarily been paying the attention to it that it deserves or giving the attention to it that it deserves, or you're the group of people who feel like you're actually pretty good already and you're not necessarily convinced that postural dysfunction is a cause for you, we want to give you guys a really simple framework to just know straight away. And the reason why this is such a profound conversation that we're about to have is that not only is it just ridiculously simple and straightforward, but it will give you all the tools you need to know to be able to figure out where your spinal dysfunction has come from. Because we're going to go through a certain shape that we want you to practice, or to at least to measure everything up against. And anything you do throughout the day, whether it's sitting related, which will be the main context of today's video, or you're someone who leans over all day, or someone who stands all day, we want to base your day-to-day, the quality of your day-to-day spinal shapes completely up against this position. And anytime you move away from that position, we're going to get some really strong feedback and some strong information as to whether that's potentially something that you need to make sure that you're getting better at if you want your spinal dysfunction and any of the symptoms or the consequences associated with that to go away. If you want it to go away, you've got to be talking and having this conversation with yourself. So before we get into it, please let me know in the comments below. Let me know what's brought you to see this video. Are you someone who feels like your posture is pretty good day to day? Or are you someone who just throw your hands up and say, look, you got me. It hasn't been great for a while. I just haven't been paying enough attention to it, but I see what you're talking about right off the bat. Let me know who you are down below. Let me know what you're dealing with. If you've got some spinal pain, some headaches, some shoulder pain, what's made you interested in your posture if you are interested? Because generally, as I've said before on the channel, it's not a very sexy topic of conversation. It's rarely interesting to too many people unless you're a huge nerd like myself. But let me know. And then if you do go on to enjoy the video, if you find it useful, if you find this piece of information profound and helpful, please consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you're new and you're looking to get this type of information on a regular basis. It really helps the channel grow and it really helps us out a lot. So If you could do that for us, that would be fantastic. So getting into this, the piece of information that we want to get you to think about is, I'm going to show you guys how to find your best posture. Now, this isn't necessarily it may not necessarily look perfect. We don't necessarily have to make it look perfect, but we want to give you a sense of how it feels to be in a pretty good position. And then I'm going to show you how to adapt that particular shape to any shape or any condition that you might find yourself in. But as I said, for the purposes of this video, we'll talk about it in the context of sitting, because sitting is such a prevalent situation that our bodies get exposed to. I remember reading a while ago, and I forget the statistics specifically, but it's something staggering, like the average American or the average human being can sit between, I think it's 6 to 14 hours a day, every day, depending on what they have to do. And when we consider, sitting down to go to the toilet, sitting down to eat a meal, sitting down to study or work, sitting down to commute, you've had a big day of sitting, you go sit on the couch to relax from all the sitting you've done during the day, then you'll get up, you go to bed, you'll sit up in bed and do some things as well. It's very easy for there to be a through line, a common thread throughout your daily life of sitting for a lot of people. And in these times where there's a pandemic and things like that, sitting is going to be something that we're probably doing more than we want to. But even though the activities that we do might differ, like you might be driving, you might be playing games online, you might be working, you might be sitting up in bed watching TikTok or watching YouTube videos like this one, the activity may differ, but the position that your body is in may be relatively common. So for you, I guess, to make this video specific to you watching, pick the things that you do most often throughout the day. So for me as a physical therapist, I get the luxury of not sitting all day, but I'm often standing, leaning over a bed. So the context that I need to create for myself is that I might be doing that for 10 hours a day. So clearly that's potentially going to be the situation I'm in the most. So maybe the sitting-based stuff isn't as prevalent for me, but on a weekend when I'm not working, I'm still like everyone else. I can still sit down and watch a movie or play games online or watch YouTube or do something like that and default into a bad shape if I'm not paying attention. So as I said, we want to adapt this idea to your context, to what you feel is most specific throughout the day, and then we can sort of work back from that and figure out where you need to get better. And as I said before, if you feel like you have good posture, don't take my word for this, do the exercise and figure it out for yourself, because there's a really important piece of information that I'll come back to at the end once you've adopted this, that potentially will give you all the information you need to figure out how good you are posturally. So without further ado, we want to get into it. So I'm going to have to stand up here. My head will go out of the frame, but hopefully you'll still be able to hear me and understand what I'm saying. So what we want to do basically is you just want to find a chair. Any chair that you would adopt and sit in throughout the day is perfect. Again, it doesn't matter what the chair is. It's the principle that we want to take away from this. So the first thing we want to get you to do, and we'll breeze through this because again, this position is important, but it's the next position that's extra important. So to find a good position, what I normally say to my patients is, we want to get you standing up tall with your feet straight. Now, a lot of people who stand in a pretty good position, and standing is a more active position than sitting. So it's a lot easier for people to adopt a good standing posture, which is also one of the reasons why a lot of people feel like they have good posture, because they take note of their posture when they stand. But we want to really preach the importance of the postures and the positions that you're in when you're sitting, because that's where we often spend more time than we do standing throughout the day. So to find that good position, we want to make sure that you're up nice and tall. So I say comfortably tall, feet relatively straight. I ask people to squeeze their glutes, because what that does is that puts your pelvis in a good position. So if you're one of those people who stands in an anteriorly tilted position where that bowl is dumped forwards, if you squeeze your glutes, it will pull your hips and your pelvis into a better position. So you can squeeze those glutes to reorientate your pelvis into a good position. And then we want to get you to stand up comfortably tall. And I say just comfortably take your shoulders back. Again, you don't want your chin to be poking out, which you can't see on the video. Essentially, you don't want necessarily that chin to be poking out. You want to feel like you're being pulled up into a good position with those shoulders comfortably back, but doing that in a standing shape. And the reason why I get everyone to start doing this when standing is because the difference between standing and sitting is literally nothing from the waist up. So when you sit down, if you take that really good sort of trunk position, that good shoulder position, the good pelvic position, when you sit down, literally nothing should change except for your hips and knees bending. So that same orientation should be identical from when you're standing to when you're sitting. The only difference is if you are someone who uses a computer or drives a car, is that your arms or elbows may move based on that, but your shoulder blade positioning is the same. So if you're reaching for something, ideally you should be able to maintain the same scapular position. You shouldn't feel like you're starting to round or to dump into a different shape. Now, the reason why this is so important is that if you can stand in a good position, which most people can, when you sit down again, you should still feel you can do this. And then when you come back to your chair, what you should then see is that this chair for me is a good chair. I feel like I'm in a good position here. And when I try and relax and slouch, I can't really go anywhere. But for a lot of chairs that may angle backwards or maybe curve in a little bit or are quite soft, we can get to a position where we're ending up in a less than ideal shape. Now, if I'm sitting in this position, this made it look like a terrible shape, like I'm not in a really hunched over, horrible position. But the tenets of this shape, if I keep my body in the same position, and hopefully you can see this on the video, if I stand up again, essentially I'm in the same spinal position, but this time I'm in a rounded shape. So instead of being up nice and tall in a good position, which is highlighted by the same position when I'm sitting, adopting that position and then standing up again without changing anything puts me in a horrible shape. So it's important to understand that the spine and the body that you use when you're standing is obviously the exact same spine, the exact same tissue that you're using and relying on when you're sitting. So the best expression of that anatomy isn't any different based on whether you're standing or sitting or bending or twisting or anything like that. The principles are the same. So the reason why this is so important is that if you sit down in a chair and you've got a really great ergonomic setup, and you've got your mouse and everything's the right height and your shoulders are back, you're in a great position, and you're one of those people who feel like your posture is perfect or really good at least, the next question for you is this the same position that you started in? Is it the same position that you're in half an hour later, an hour later, 2 hours later, or however long you're there for? So, and the reality is for a lot of people is if you don't practice this consciously, you may not have the endurance to stay here long term. So what we often see is that after 10 or 15 minutes, it's easy to then start to drop into a different position and you're losing sight. But the psychology behind this is because you started in a good position, it gives you the confidence that you are in a good posture, so you have good posture. And then because your attention is elsewhere, you're attending to what you're doing, which you should be doing, then all of a sudden you're not necessarily getting that feedback unless something starts to get sore, something starts to get a bit tight through your neck, maybe back starts to get a little bit sore 2 hours into it, but by that stage the horse has already bolted. You've already spent 2 hours in a less than perfect shape, most likely sort of overextending or overexposing the sections of your spine that are leading to neck pain, back pain, hip pain, or all the peripheral issues that filter down, like patellar tendonitis or RSI or tennis elbow, or whatever it is. And when we're looking back to the positions that you're in the most, we'll often find a long-term discrepancy between this ideal sort of standing and sitting position and maybe where you end up over time. So as I said right at the top of the video, as simple as this is, it is probably the most important piece of postural information you can take from any conversation about posture, because if you know what a good position feels like when you stand, then you know exactly what a good position feels like when you're sitting. So if you're trying to answer that age-old question, what's the best chair for me? What's the best office chair? Is my seat appropriate? Instead of having to guess about what you need to suit your body, if you sit down in the chair, you'll know exactly what needs to happen straight away. So for me, I'm lucky because if I'm in a good position, this chair stops me from slouching. So I can be in this position for a little bit longer than I could in a different chair. But if I end up in this position, if the chair sort of forces me to sink into this position to find stability and comfort, then I need to adapt this chair in some way. So I had a towel, I'll just jump off screen here. So for anyone who needs to improve their chair, a very simple concept is just to roll up a thick towel. It can be anything, it can be a pillow, it doesn't matter what it is. But all you need to know is that you need to fill the gap that's created by the back of the chair in your spine with something other than your spine. So if you know your chair's not great, grab something, put it in the part of your back that hinges when you relax and when you slouch, and all of a sudden you can block that sort of loss of good spinal position with something other than your back. So by doing that, you'll know in an instant how good your setup is and what you need to modify about that to cultivate that ideal shape and keep you there, ideally for the length of time that you're forced to sit. Now, clearly, you don't have to sit, please don't. Standing desks are better than seats. Fit balls or Swiss balls are better than seats. Movement is forever better than being stuck in an isolated seat for hours on end. But if you just have to be there, if you just have to be compromised, which is a common thing throughout society today, maybe you're on a long flight, maybe you have to drive to the city, even if you're just stuck answering emails for hours on end, you've got to make sure that the position that you start in is very similar to the position that you finish in, and there's not much deviation in between. Because if you are in a position and not in a bad position and not knowing about it for too long, depending on where the hinges are in your tissue, where the breaks are in your tissue, over time you're going to set yourself up for some form of dysfunction. And again, it may not be actual pain or injury, but there's going to be some stiff joints. There's going to be some tight tissue. Those capsules are going to get stiff. The tissues that you're relying on to keep you in a good position aren't being used, so they're going to get a little bit weaker. So while it may not end up in pain and injury, it's going to decrease your function. If you're an athlete, it's going to rob you of athletic performance and potential completely unnecessarily. So hopefully that piece of information was really useful for you guys. Just to reiterate, if you can stand in a good position, you can sit in a good position, and everything needs to conform to that shape and support you in that shape. Otherwise, you're going to be doing yourself a disservice long term. So as I said, it's a conversation that we have very regularly with anyone who has some spinal dysfunction. And it's a really it's a bit of an awakening when you go through this process. So I urge you guys watching this, as soon as you get off this, or even if you're doing it while you're watching it, run that test, and then the positions that you're in most often, compare them. And if it's not good enough, it's not good enough long term. And you've got to make some changes if you value good spinal function and good peripheral tissue health and anything that links into that concept as well. So hopefully that was useful. As I said, let me know in the comments below what you think of this. It's such an important topic of conversation to master. So I hope you guys get something out of it. So as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.